You have probably eaten something invented in Atlanta today without giving it a single thought. The city, known for its music, its traffic, and its southern heat, has been quietly shaping the way Americans eat for well over a century and a half. Some of the most iconic drinks in the world, some of the most beloved fast food sandwiches ever created, and some of the comfort meals that have become deeply personal traditions for millions of families, all started in one Georgia city. Atlanta does not always get the credit it deserves as a food capital, but the evidence is impossible to ignore once you start looking. Today, we are counting down 10 foods that were invented in Atlanta, and by the time we reach number 1, you are going to see everything from your morning coffee run to your Friday night takeout order in a completely different light. Stay until the very end because the story behind the top pick on this list is stranger, more dramatic, and more surprising than almost any food origin story in American history. Let us get into it. At number 10, Moe's Southwest Grill. Not every food invention comes from a chef, a grandmother's kitchen, or decades of culinary tradition. Sometimes a food invention comes from a group of people who look at an existing concept and decide they can do it louder, friendlier, and with better ingredients. That is exactly what happened in Atlanta in the year 2000 when a restaurant group called Raving Brands opened the very first Moe's Southwest Grill in the Buckhead neighborhood. The concept was straightforward on the surface. Take the build-your-own burrito format that had been gaining popularity in other parts of the country and inject it with personality. Give it a rock and roll attitude. Name the menu items after pop culture references. Greet every single customer who walks through the door with a shout of, "Welcome to Moe's," that the entire staff delivers in unison. Every time, without exception. And make sure the food itself is worth the enthusiasm, because enthusiasm alone does not keep people coming back. What started as a single restaurant in one of Atlanta's most upscale neighborhoods quickly became something much larger. Within a few years, Moe's Southwest Grill had franchises spreading across the American South and then far beyond it. The Joey Burrito, the Home Wrecker, the Art Vandelay. These were menu items that people talked about the way they talked about their favorite songs. The Atlanta DNA of Moe's is still visible in everything the chain does. The warmth, the loudness, the sense that eating a burrito should be an event rather than just a transaction. All of that started on a single street in Buckhead. Today, there are more than 700 Moe's locations across the United States, and every single one of them still shouts that welcome the moment you walk in. That tradition was born in Atlanta, and it has never changed. At number 9, Mellow Mushroom Pizza. In 1974, 3 students at Georgia Tech were doing what Georgia Tech students often do, which is applying an engineering mindset to a problem that seemed simple on the surface, but turned out to be far more complicated underneath. The problem they were trying to solve was pizza. Specifically, they wanted to understand why so much of the pizza available near their campus was mediocre when pizza, at its core, was one of the greatest foods ever conceived. The answer they arrived at was the dough. Most pizza joints were cutting corners on the dough, rushing the fermentation process, using inferior ingredients, and the result was a crust that held everything together but contributed nothing beyond structural support. The 3 students decided they were going to do it differently. They started making pizza with spring water. They let the dough rise slowly. They committed to the kind of care and patience that commercial pizza operations usually abandoned in favor of speed and volume. The result was Mellow Mushroom, a restaurant that opened near Georgia Tech in 1974 and immediately built a following that had nothing to do with advertising and everything to do with one very simple thing. The pizza was better than anything else available nearby, and people told other people, and those people came, and they told more people. The restaurant's atmosphere leaned into the era's counterculture aesthetic, colorful, slightly psychedelic, completely relaxed in a way that made you want to stay for hours. Over the following decades, Mellow Mushroom grew from that single Atlanta location into a chain with more than 150 restaurants across the country. The commitment to the spring water dough, to the slow rise, to treating ingredients with respect has remained central to the brand's identity ever since. It all started because 3 college students in Atlanta refused to accept mediocre pizza. At number 8, Atlanta-style lemon pepper wings. There is no official patent on this one. There is no single restaurant that can point to a signed document and declare we invented lemon pepper wings on this specific date in this specific kitchen. But food historians, Atlanta food writers, and generations of people who grew up eating in the city will all tell you the same thing. The lemon pepper wing, as a cultural phenomenon and as a distinct style of preparation that became recognized across the entire country, came from Atlanta. The combination of bright citrus and cracked black pepper, applied to fried chicken wings in a dry rub format rather than a wet sauce, was being developed and perfected in Atlanta's Black-owned restaurants and neighborhood wing spots throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s. What made the Atlanta lemon pepper wing different from anything else on the market was the commitment to the dry coating. Rather than tossing wings in a sauce that made the skin soft and heavy, Atlanta cooks applied the seasoning in a way that preserved the crunch of the fried exterior, while delivering a punch of flavor in every single bite. The combination of the fat from the wing, the acid from the lemon, and the heat and earthiness of cracked black pepper created something that was far more than the sum of its parts. Through the late 1990s and into the 2000s, as Atlanta became one of the most culturally influential cities in America through its music and entertainment industries, the lemon pepper wing traveled. Athletes talked about it. Musicians referenced it in interviews. People visiting Atlanta for the first time made special trips to specific wing spots just for this preparation alone. By the 2000s, lemon pepper wings were on menus in cities all across the country, and every single one of them owed something to the cooks in Atlanta who figured out this particular combination long before anyone else was paying attention. At number 7, the frosted orange at the Varsity. In 1928, a young man named Frank Gordy was expelled from Georgia Tech for the crime of selling food near campus without authorization. Most people in that situation would have reconsidered their approach. Frank Gordy reconsidered nothing. He took the small amount of money he had, rented a tiny piece of property directly across the street from the school that had just kicked him out, and opened a small stand selling hot dogs and hamburgers. That stand eventually grew into the Varsity, which became the largest drive-in restaurant in the world, covering 2 full city blocks and serving tens of thousands of customers every single day during its peak years. For decades, the Varsity fed Atlanta. It fed the people who built the city during the post-war boom. It fed the civil rights marchers who needed a meal between demonstrations. It fed the college students, the construction workers, the politicians, the professors, and the tourists who all somehow ended up at the same counter, ordering the same food in the same line. And somewhere in the middle of all that history, Frank Gordy introduced the frosted orange. The recipe itself is almost embarrassingly simple. Orange juice blended with vanilla ice cream until thick and creamy. That is it. No exotic ingredients, no complicated technique, just 2 things treated with absolute respect and served ice cold in a city that understood the value of something cold on a hot Georgia afternoon. What the frosted orange became is something much larger than its ingredients. It became a tradition, a rite of passage, a thing that Atlanta parents introduced to their children the same way their own parents had introduced it to them decades earlier. People have driven from other states specifically to drink one. The Varsity still serves thousands of frosted oranges every single day, and the recipe has not changed in nearly a century. At number 6, the Varsity Chili Dog. Since we are already talking about the Varsity, we cannot leave without addressing the item that has defined the restaurant and the city around it since the very beginning. The chili dog at the Varsity is not a complicated food. It is a steamed hot dog bun, a quality Frank cooked properly, and a ladle of house-made chili that has been prepared according to a closely guarded recipe since 1928. What makes it remarkable is not the complexity of its ingredients, but the absolute consistency of its execution over nearly 100 years of continuous operation. The chili is savory and rich and seasoned in a way that complements the dog without overwhelming it. The bun is soft but sturdy enough to hold everything together through the last bite. When you get a chili dog at the Varsity, you are getting the same food that generations of Atlanta residents have been getting since before World War II. The famous staff at the Varsity shout your order in a rapid-fire call and response that has become one of the most recognizable sounds in Atlanta food culture. The question, "What'll you have?" has become something close to a civic motto. On game days at Georgia Tech, on summer afternoons, on the days when the city feels most fully like itself, the lines at the Varsity wrap around the building. And nobody minds because everybody knows exactly what is coming and exactly what it is going to taste like. The dressed chili dog as a regional identity food, as a thing that defines a place and the people who live there, started right here. At number 5, Tab Cola. In 1963, the Coca-Cola Company, headquartered in Atlanta as it had been since the very beginning, faced a question that the entire food and beverage industry was starting to wrestle with seriously for the first time. Americans were becoming more conscious of what they were eating and drinking. The word diet was appearing in more and more conversations. People were asking whether it was possible to enjoy the flavor of a soft drink without all the sugar that came with it. The scientists and product developers working for Coca-Cola in Atlanta spent years trying to answer that question seriously and scientifically. The answer they came up with was Tab. Tab was the first major diet cola in American history, and it was invented in Atlanta. The name came from the idea of keeping tabs on your calorie intake, which was exactly the kind of simple, intuitive marketing concept that Coca-Cola's teams were skilled at developing. Tab used saccharin as its sweetener rather than sugar, and the result was a drink that tasted different from regular Coca-Cola but was recognizably in the same family. Women in particular embraced Tab throughout the 1960s and 1970s as diet culture became a growing and increasingly powerful part of American life. The pink can became iconic. Tab was the first soft drink to be explicitly marketed as a diet beverage to a mass consumer audience, and its success opened a door that transformed the entire industry permanently. Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke, and every diet soft drink that has ever appeared on a grocery store shelf owes its existence to the team of beverage scientists working in Atlanta who decided to answer the question of whether you could enjoy your cola without the calories. Tab itself was discontinued by Coca-Cola in 2020, but the category it created never went away and never will. At number 4, Waffle House. On Labor Day in 1955, two men named Joe Rogers Sr. and Tom Faulkner opened a small restaurant in Avondale Estates, a suburb of Atlanta, on a piece of land that Tom Faulkner had originally planned to use for something else entirely. The restaurant they built was simple, and deliberately so. It had a counter, a handful of seats, and a menu focused on the kinds of food that working people wanted at any hour of the day or night. Eggs, bacon, coffee, grits, and waffles. The original Waffle House was open around the clock because Rogers and Faulkner had noticed something that most restaurant owners in 1955 had not paid much attention to. People got hungry at 2 in the morning. People coming off late shifts wanted a hot meal at 3 in the morning. People driving through the South on the interstate at 4 in the morning needed somewhere to stop that was not a vending machine. Waffle House was there for all of them, always, without exception. The food was straightforward and cooked to order on a grill you could watch from your stool. The hash browns became famous in their own right because of the elaborate vocabulary that developed around how to customize them. Scattered meant spread out thin on the grill. Smothered meant covered with sautéed onions. Covered meant melted cheese on top. Chunked meant with ham. Diced meant with tomatoes. Capped meant with mushrooms. Over the years, this ordering vocabulary grew into something that regular customers passed along to newcomers as a kind of initiation ritual. Today, Waffle House has more than 2,000 locations, almost all of them in the American South, and the chain has become so dependably consistent that the Federal Emergency Management Agency uses its status during natural disasters as an unofficial indicator of how severe the damage is. If the Waffle House is open, things are manageable. If the Waffle House is closed, the situation is genuinely dire. That scale of cultural significance started with two men and a restaurant in a suburb of Atlanta. At number 3, Sprite. By the late 1950s, Coca-Cola's leadership in Atlanta was watching the beverage landscape carefully and noticing something interesting happening in Europe. A new category of soft drink had appeared, a lemon-lime carbonated beverage with a clear color and a crisp, clean flavor profile that was genuinely different from anything Coca-Cola was currently selling in the American market. Coca-Cola's Atlanta-based development team began working on their own version for American consumers, and the result was Sprite, which launched in the United States in 1961 under the Coca-Cola umbrella. What Atlanta's product developers understood was that the American market needed a clear, lemon-lime soda that was unmistakably refreshing in a way that cut through the sweetness dominating most sodas of the era. Sprite was designed to be clean, bright, and slightly tart, a palate cleanser as much as a soft drink, something you could reach for when you wanted something lighter than cola but more interesting than water. For decades, Sprite competed with 7-Up for dominance in the lemon-lime category. And throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the brand became deeply embedded in hip-hop culture through its marketing campaigns. The fact that Atlanta itself was one of the defining capitals of hip-hop made this connection feel like something more than coincidence. By the late 1990s, Sprite had overtaken 7-Up as the dominant lemon-lime soda in the United States. Today, Sprite is sold in more than 190 countries. The clean, fizzy, lemon-lime soda that billions of people reach for every single day was developed and launched by a team working in Atlanta. At number 2, the Chick-fil-A Original Chicken Sandwich. In 1946, a man named Truett Cathy opened a small diner called the Dwarf Grill in Hapeville, Georgia, which sits directly in the flight path of what was then called Atlanta Municipal Airport. The diner was small, the hours were brutally long, and the competition from nearby establishments was real and constant. Cathy needed something that would set his food apart from everything else in the area, something nobody else was doing well or doing at all. For years, he worked on a deceptively simple concept. He wanted to cook a chicken breast in the same kind of pressure fryer that was typically used for whole pieces of chicken. But he wanted to apply that method to a boneless breast alone, and he wanted to serve it on a toasted buttered bun with exactly 2 pickle chips. The result of that experimentation, which took him the better part of nearly 2 decades to refine and perfect, was the original Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich, which he debuted commercially in 1964. The genius of what Cathy created was entirely in the details. The pressure cooking method kept the chicken extraordinarily juicy, even as the exterior developed a thin, golden crust. The butter on the bun added richness that complemented the savory chicken without competing with it. The 2 pickle chips provided the acidic contrast that cut through the fat and kept every single bite tasting fresh. The sandwich was simple, it was affordable, and it was unlike anything else being sold in American fast food at the time. Most fast food chicken in the mid-1960s was fried in open fryers and served in bone-in pieces. Cathy's sandwich was boneless, portable, and designed from the beginning to be eaten with one hand. It changed the entire fast food industry's relationship with chicken. Today, Chick-fil-A is the largest chicken restaurant chain in the United States by revenue. And the original sandwich that started everything still tastes almost exactly the way Truett Cathy intended it to taste in a small diner in the shadow of the Atlanta airport 60 years ago. At number 1, Coca-Cola. On May 8th of 1886, a pharmacist named John Stith Pemberton stirred a large copper kettle in his backyard in Atlanta, Georgia, and created one of the most consequential beverages in the entire history of human civilization. Pemberton was a Confederate veteran who had survived the Civil War and the morphine addiction that the war had left him with. By the 1880s, he was experimenting with various patent medicine preparations, looking for something that might help with pain and fatigue without the dependency risks he had experienced personally. When Atlanta passed prohibition legislation that made wine-based preparations illegal, Pemberton reformulated what he had been developing. He replaced the wine with carbonated water and combined it with an extract made from coca leaves and cola nuts, along with a carefully developed blend of oils, acids, and natural flavors that he kept strictly secret. He called the resulting beverage Coca-Cola, and he brought it to a pharmacy called Jacob's Pharmacy in downtown Atlanta, where it was sold at the soda fountain counter for 5 cents a glass, beginning in the spring of 1886. In its first year, Coca-Cola sold an average of 9 servings per day. Today, more than 2 billion servings of Coca-Cola products are consumed every single day in virtually every country on Earth. Pemberton himself sold the rights to the formula for $1,200, shortly before his death in 1888. He died without fully understanding what he had started or what it would eventually become. He never saw the bottling plants, the international expansion, the advertising campaigns that turned his formula into a global symbol, or the skyscraper that now bears the brand's name in the city where he mixed his first batch. The Coca-Cola Company, still headquartered in Atlanta on the same general stretch of city where Pemberton stirred his copper kettle, became one of the most powerful corporations in the history of the world. The distinctive contour bottle shape is among the most recognizable industrial designs ever created. The brand's imagery has shaped how people in countries on every continent visualize American culture, and all of it, every bit of it, started with a pharmacist's experiment in a backyard in Atlanta. 10 foods, 1 city, a history that stretches from a Civil War veteran's backyard experiment to 2 billion servings consumed every day across the globe. Atlanta has been inventing the way the world eats and drinks for more than 150 years, and it has never stopped. If this video surprised you even once, drop a comment below with the food that caught you most off guard. And if you want to keep exploring the history hidden inside the foods and drinks you interact with every single day, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, keep asking where things came from, and we will see you next time.